It has risen 8 days in a row after falling every day for 14 weeks. AAA's national average for regulars now $3.76 a gallon. That's 8 cents higher than last week, 58 cents more than we were paying 1 year ago. Now, a provision to revise energy permitting is on hold in Congress after objections from some Republicans and Democrats. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer removed it from a bill to provide short-term funding by Friday to avert a government shutdown. That bill then cleared a procedural hurdle in the Senate.
Senator Manchin, myself, and others will continue to have conversations about the best way to ensure responsible permitting reform is passed before the end of the year.
Now, some Americans have flipped the switch and are now driving electric cars. And someday we might fly electric. A prototype plane took off in a test yesterday in Washington State.
The plane was built by startup Aviation and designed to carry 9 passengers and up to 2 pilots. The aircraft took off from Moses Lake, Washington at 7:10 a.m., then landed safely 8 minutes later. If the Federal Aviation Administration eventually certifies the small airplane to carry passengers, it could become the first all-electric commercial airplane. The company wants to show that it can be used as a commuter aircraft that flies at an altitude around 15,000 feet. This plane is powered by 21,500 small Tesla-style battery cells. It was designed by engineers in Washington State and Israel. John Saucier, Fox News.
In baseball, 2 teams clinched division titles, the New York Yankees and St. Louis Cardinals. I'm Dave Anthony. This is Fox News.
WPTV's First Alert Weather on WSTU is brought to you by Sailfish Roofing, offering excellence, honesty, and integrity in everything they do. Sailfish Roofing, 772-263-ROOF. Community roofing company you can trust. Sailfish Roofing. Now here's WPTV's First Alert meteorologist.
Hurricane Ian is now a Category 4 with winds of 140 miles an hour. Additional strengthening is possible before landfall this afternoon around Cape Coral. We'll continue to see those wicked rain bands on our side of the state today with isolated tornadoes, torrential rain at times as some of those stronger feeder bands move through. A tropical storm warning remains in effect until further notice. Stay off the roads today, but if you must travel, use extreme caution. In case you're wondering, much nicer weather is in store by Friday and into the weekend. I'm WPTV First Alert meteorologist John Gerard for WSTU 1450, Martin County's Heritage Station.
You are listening to WSTU, Stewart, Jensen Beach, Hope Sound, Martin County's Heritage Station.
It's time now for the Casey Ingram Show on WSTU. The opinions expressed are those of the program host and guest and not necessarily those of WSTU. WSTU does not endorse products that may be mentioned. Any reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited without written consent of WSTU. It's time to call in with your questions and comments at 220-9788, 220-WSTU. And now, here's Casey Ingram.
Good morning, everybody. We're doing pretty good over here on the Treasure Coast, and I'll tell you, we had a wonderful drive in this morning. The traffic is very light, so everybody's staying safe at home. That's good. There are some issues with ponding, but for the most part, I think we're doing pretty good over here on the East Coast. But boy, are we praying for our friends on the West Coast. That looks a little scary over there, as Ian is just about making landfall right now. And last I heard, it was very close to that Cat 5. So, of course, we were thinking about them, but in the meantime, we have a lot of good topics to discuss here on the show, and today is no exception to that. We're going to be talking about the Rural Lifestyle Amendment, and before we go into that, and my special guest today, which is Paul Laura, I want to thank my sponsors, and the first one I want to thank is the Commercial Mortgage LLC. With COVID and unexpected expenses, illnesses, there are many issues that can cause your successful business to slump deep into the red. Commercial Mortgage is there to help, and they only get paid if they provide you a workout. Debt restructuring is complicated, and they are the negotiator between you and your creditors. Commercial Mortgage has been in the industry of small balance corporate finance since 2003. The focus is on challenging corporate foreclosures, debt restructures, equity, and new debt solutions. The issues are often not easy to see or understand when you run a business and are faced with multifaceted debt challenges that include legal action on various fronts. That's where Commercial Mortgage comes in. They never charge a front fee or deposit and are are only paid if they successfully provide you a debt workout. Areas of expertise include hotels, marinas, office buildings, restaurants, apartments, multifamily condos, golf courses, home builders, land development, including new and repurposed developments. Call Commercial Mortgage LLC at 772-872-6099 or visit them online at commercialmortgagellc.com. Also, folks, I've been saying this every week, but we truly are in the middle of the hurricane season, and today is a really good warning. If you have not secured safe harborage for your boat, please do so today. Once a hurricane is named and is coming ashore, I can pretty much tell you, you will not find a place in this town to keep your boat. So you'll want to call Indiantown Marina. It is one of South Florida's best boat storage facilities. It's located inland on the Okeechobee Waterway, so they are a very well-protected hurricane hull. I would say probably one of the best protected hurricane holes around. And while your boat is there, it's a do-it-yourself and full-service boat yard. So give them a call today, 772-631-3272. 631-3272. Your boat is not a cheap investment. You want to protect it. Give Indiantown Marina today and know that you'll keep it safe. And finally, one of the best-kept secrets in Martin County is right down in the pocket in Port Salerno. It is the Fish House Art Center. You can look them up online before you head out, thefishhouseartcenter.com. You can come by boat, stroll the boardwalk, explore what's best kept secret has to offer. The boardwalk features local artists, an Airbnb, art gallery, boat charters, marina, craft and creamery, something really for the whole family. You have craft beers, wine, and 24 flavors of ice cream for the kids or yourself. Also bike rentals and paddleboard rentals, so there really is a lot of fun down there. So go ahead and visit the Fish House Art Center down in the pocket, Port Salerno. Give them a call ahead of time if you have a question, 221-5482. And also, everybody, I want to let you know about an event that's coming up on Saturday, October 15 from 7 to 9 a.m. The NAACP of Martin County is going to have their second annual it's a 5K and 10K run, and it honors Miss Thelma Waters. And this is the second annual. They're going to have it at the Guy Davis Field at Stewart's 10th Street Recreational Center. And it's just $35 for the 5K, $45 for the 10K. And you can sign up at runsignup.com/Martin County NAACP 5K 10K run. And we're going to have Jimmy Smith on the air for a few minutes next week to talk a little bit more about that. So here we are now today. I am so excited to talk about the Rural Lifestyle Amendment, and with me today I have Paul Laura. Paul Laura has considerable executive, technical, marketing, sales, and business development experience in the domestic and international markets. He has 35 years experience, including 12 years on assignments overseas with Lubrizol, a subsidiary of Berkshire Hathaway and Whitco Corporation. Currently, Mr. Laura spends a significant amount of his time volunteering in Florida environmental causes and is a board member of Hutchinson Island Preservation Initiative, Marine Resources Council, Palm Bay, Florida, and a technical advisor to the Indian River Keeper. He is also assisting in phytoplankton study of the Indian River Lagoon as part of the University of Florida Extension Project and NOAA. In the past, he has participated on oyster mussel projects with the Smithsonian at their marine station on Hutchinson Island in Florida. And Mr. Laura has an undergraduate degree in science from St. John's University, New York, and a graduate degree in science from the University of Florida in Gainesville. So welcome, Paul, and welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's nice to be back. Thank you for asking me.
Well, it's my pleasure. And this Rural Lifestyle Amendment, just to give you a little background, folks, it was voted on the September 13 Board of County Commission meeting, and Miss Commissioner Stacey Hetherington was really the swing vote with this particular amendment, and it was highly debated, and all the commissioners had a lot of really good input on both sides that day, and it was really a tough vote. And in the end, she did vote yes for this Rural Lifestyle Amendment. And I invited Paul in here today because this was an emotional amendment for a lot of folks as well, and we really want to cut through the chase and talk about what this Rural Lifestyle Amendment means to the county, what it means to our urban service border. And really there's a lot of benefits to this as well. So we need to discuss the components of that Rural Lifestyle Amendment. And I also want to shout out to everybody, if you've been following the pet ordinance issue, Commissioner Hetherington, really, she brought out her bold leadership again yesterday when she asked to revisit that ordinance. And with a 5-0 vote, the county commission said, yes, we do need to include those 2 pet stores in the conversation about this ordinance. And they have asked for them to come back with the Animal Care Control and Oversight Board and bring an ordinance that works for everybody. So we're very excited about that. And I have to shout out with my favorite Facebook comment so far that I've seen since the vote. It was be a Stacy, not a Karen. So Commissioner Hetherington, thank you. You've had a couple really meetings where your leadership has really shown, and we appreciate it. So, Paul, let's start out. What is the Rural Lifestyle Comp Plan Amendment that was passed?
Well, it's a concept. I should say first before I start that I am not representing any environmental group today. I mean, all the environmental groups were pretty much in opposition to the rural lifestyle. My point of view was that I don't think it was given enough discussion. And like everything in life, timing is not perfect, but what we had was a combination of the county trying to think, what are we going to do with 130,000 acres that are still open for development in Martin County? And what can we do about that? Well, along comes Discovery. Maybe it's not the best timing, but they come up and they are a well-known domestic and international developer that develops premium properties. And so they were offering some new ideas. And in this particular case, the current rural lifestyle, who I think maybe over time may change a little bit, just adjoins to the urban boundary. So it's not a proposal in a sense to move the urban boundary, although you could make an argument that it might be, but just those acreage that is along the urban boundary, which could take advantage of the water and sewer. One of the conflicts that I often see is that as an environmentalist, we don't want septic systems. Right. And yet there was opposition to providing water and sewage to some of these developers. And I guess that's a little bit of a conundrum that we have to think about. And there's no one right answer. No one's saying there is. But I feel we have to start down a pathway to develop a policy before the state comes in and says you no longer have home rule. And that is the big issue that I think everyone needs to consider. Maybe we should have a plan in place that we could argue to the state. And if we don't have one, well, then there's a vacuum and people will take advantage of that. So instead of having, in this case, to bring up about Discovery, instead of having 317 homes or maybe a few more because there's some small units that need to be made for workers, we would have 4,000 homes built on the same land. And this is a way to control it because you have to give 70% of your total acreage, which is a minimum of 1,000 to join the rural lifestyle designation. You have to reserve 70% as open terrain and 30% you would build on. Well, 30%, the return on investment, if you think of it economically, it gets a little difficult to put a whole lot of homes on that amount of land. And of course, you're limited. You can't build up too high because you have a limitation on how many stories you can actually build. So the return on investment has to be considered where the homes would probably be a bit more pricey in order to be able to meet that designation. And then also there's a limit to how many of those kinds of properties you would be able to have because just again, the return on investment, there's a limitation to how many people could afford it. So there is a limit, and that's one of the big things that environmental bring up. The environmental groups like myself are always concerned about density of population and not having urban sprawl is the common term that's usually used.
Paul, I'll stop you for 1 second here, folks. Again, if you want to join this conversation, you can call into the station 772-220-9788, 220-WSTU. I'm also watching Facebook Live for comments, and Amy Pritchard, she's one of our new school board members, she said, I think the disappointment shown had more to do with the lack of education. People felt that the rural lifestyle should not have been explained by the developers. The county took a very back seat.
Yeah, as I would like to say again, and I use this term often, I'm not sure there is one right answer to that. However, I made a different approach, and I thought really the environmental groups should have engaged the developer to get a more even conversation, because the conversation got very emotional where they couldn't talk to each other. And as a result of that, the environmental groups put out some misinformation which should have been controlled, that everyone's taxes were going up. Well, that's not true, because Discovery is going to install everything at their own cost. And again, if they knew the economics, where they're going to have, according to the study that was done by a third party, $21 million in ad valorem, well, I mean, that should be able to pay for a lot of things.
That's right.
Instead, people use scare tactics, and I'm not opposed to a scare tactic, but let's be honest about it and not make up things so that people get emotional and don't really, and cut off listening to what could be maybe an interesting opportunity. And that's what this is, an interesting opportunity.
It is. You stated a couple things there I want to delve into a little bit deeper. And one of them was the return on investment. And I think you brought up a very good point there, because there's very few developments that really could donate 70%, 50% of land is donated as ag or in perpetuity as a conservation tract. So 50% of the land, but the developer has to also maintain that in perpetuity with their own money. So very few developments can actually take on that type of expense and still have that return on investment that makes it worth their while. So that's one thing that I think, if folks are worried there's going to be a ton of this, there's a double-edged sword there. I think we talked about it before. Is it really that bad if there was a ton of it, with 70% of land being green space?
Yeah, I mean, if you do the math of 130,000 acres, it's 91,000 acres that are open terrain. Now,
would that be amazing? That's incredible.
That's pretty cool.
Yes.
However, rightfully so, environmental groups would say, well, some of that's going to be in golf courses. And it is.
Right.
However, two things I'd like to offer. One is that, first of all, how many golf courses can you have for 91,000 acres that are open land?
Right.
Again, coming back to the economics. And then the other thing is that I don't believe that what we're seeing is, yesterday, let me just go back a second. Yesterday there was a commission meeting, and there was an offer for a new golf course, right? I want to say, first of all, even though we have a very environmental commissioner, it passed unanimously. And why? Because the golf course, the people who are building it, took pains to make sure that they covered a lot of things that golf courses have problems with the environment. One of them is runoff, and the other one are the nutrients that come off with herbicides. Well, that's not a nutrient, obviously, but herbicides and fertilizer. But what they did was they're talking about trying to capture that. And then also putting in the normal plants and things into the ponds that will
soak up any
get the
excess
runoff, and reduce, just as we do down in the EAA area. They use plant life to help reduce the nutrients, and so they'll release that into the St. Lucie River. But they also had an interesting idea where they're actually going to take water from the St. Lucie River, which already has a high amount of phosphorus and nitrogen,
sure does.
And they're going to use that to sprinkle onto their land. So it's reusing what is already in the water. And I thought, what a really interesting idea.
That is. It's very creative. I hadn't heard that. I'm glad you mentioned that.
And so I want to say that, yes, golf courses are a problem, but there are two things. One is you could follow the model that was just issued to Martin County commissioners yesterday, or you also have available from the state, which I happen to have gained a copy of, and it's pretty good about how to control the environmental aspects when you build a golf course, and it is available online. And so that I think is, we're going to get better at it. We're not perfect at it, but it offers us a way to get around the environmental issues.
What you just mentioned from the state, is that a best management practice
Yes.
in place already that existing golf courses follow or have to follow?
Well, I would say they're not obligated to follow it. I think it depends on the local ordinances, but it is best management practices in their view.
And that might be something for the county to look at, because this project would be a wonderful example, it sounds like, for a lot of our golf courses
Right.
too.
And another thing
utilize.
that I see coming is that some of these golf courses are getting pretty sophisticated, and and there's some investment being made, large investment. Well, there is a way to monitor phosphorus and nitrogen 24/7. Okay. And in fact, we're talking about having that type of equipment for Discovery in their ponds. They haven't worked out all the details, but a type of program which they're considering is something that will give them 24/7 maintenance, where they automatically know where they are at any moment. And I thought that's very innovative as well. And I think as technology becomes better at that, we will be able to have a very good indication of the quality of the water before we release it anywhere.
So, Paul, this is another thing with the Rural Lifestyle Amendment. As every project is brought forward under that Rural Lifestyle Amendment, they still have to get county commission approval. And I believe there's probably going to be a golf course that's coming up. So
Right.
this is something the county commission really could look at and say, we can approve it if you're doing these things. So this Rural Lifestyle Amendment wasn't a... It's just opening the chapter. It added another way for people to develop their property, but it's not hard fast as to it gives anybody the ability to just build whatever they want. Now it still has to have approvals, and that's where you can put in those regulations and something like this with the golf courses.
Right. So, for example, what does the rural lifestyle do? Well, it requires landowners to apply, and they have to meet a strict criteria. They have to, at this point in time, which I think at some point we will probably work off this, the urban boundary technically stays in place. You're just moving, those that only abut against it have this opportunity. I expect in the future we're going to have to find how to use that concept for the rest of 130,000 acres. But they have to require the applicants to undergo multiple public hearings, at least 4, according to my understanding. Requires 70% of development to be open space, and requires a landowner to establish a lifetime funding source to maintain the donated land.
That's huge, honestly.
Right? And require the developer to pay for water and sewer services. And so these types of things will generate, don't forget, the Discovery project alone will, according to outside sources, are estimated to provide $1.6 billion to the Martin County economy. And that's why, you need to pause for a second. And that's my argument. Wait a minute, this is kind of interesting. It restricts density, and we know that many people are still coming to Florida, which leads us to another problem down the road, is that this management of growth.
Right. That's a big one, and we'll step back a little bit there because you mentioned it earlier. With the management of growth, the state can step in and dictate to the county
Right.
how to rezone the housing and
Right.
what type of development that's going to be allowed. And that was brought up, and I don't know that folks really believed that.
Well, I'll give you an example. In Orange County, I think it was July of this year, okay, there was a judgment made against Orange County because they were prohibiting a builder to build on the wetlands. And of course, that's a big no-no in Martin County.
Right.
So they sued, and they won. And then now Orange County cannot stop the developer because, I'm sorry, but the developer won. And
Okay.
and in court, the judge said, no, you can't use this requirement, and he can build. So if the state is moving more and more in that direction, how long will it be before somebody does something similar, brings it to the state, and then the state rules that, well, we really don't have a real good policy in place, and it's too restrictive or whatever. And then we no longer have the control over it, and the next thing we know, people are building 4,000 homes on a 1,000-acre or 500-acre, building one unit per third acre or however you want to do the metrics.
And there's something to think about, too, with this Rural Lifestyle Amendment. We've got just 3 minutes here before we break real quickly, but it's cluster development. So that's basically what this is. 70% of it's open space. You have the homes in 30%. Paul, there's a lot of issues with that, and good issues, in my opinion. You have less roads. that are just over that. Let's take the 1,000 acres. So 300 acres will have roads, it'll have sewer, it'll have homes, but the other 70% is wide open for wildlife. I think about all the roadkill we see, even along Bridge Road, because these animals are trying to cross all these busy roads. If you have a home every 5 acres, every 20 acres, you're going to have more roads, and there's just more opportunity for the wildlife not to have any place to go, and they're always impeding on somebody's home that way. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that actual cluster development and the benefits, even environmentally, for runoff. There's less roofs that are over that entire 1,000 acres. There's a lot of issues that I think people maybe don't realize how positive this is for the environment, and that's what sold me on it.
Yeah. I would go back to the point. Let's take the bigger picture and going. If you have 130,000 acres, and theoretically it's 70%, you're at 91,000 acres of open terrain. Then what? I mean, we're always talking about restrictions on animals and wildlife as we continue to develop, and where are they going to go? Right. So if you care at all about what you think Martin County should be, this will be something different than what we see in St. Lucie or what we see in Palm Beach County, which many people are afraid will happen if they give in to the urban boundary. But if we have a good high bar development to work with and regulations for that development, I think we have a chance to succeed with more bird and more wildlife preservation.
Which is extremely important, folks. We will be right back. We're going to continue our discussion here on Rural Lifestyle Amendment. Again, you can call into the station at 220-9788, and I'm watching for comments on Facebook Live, so we'll be right back in just a moment.
Forbearances, working remotely, internet shopping, retail space, and rental income have been hit hard by COVID. If you're looking to restructure your debt, obtain financing or equity, Commercial Mortgage can help you out. Tim Mullen at Commercial Mortgage has been providing debt restructuring services since 2003. Tim never charges a front fee and all consultations are free. Tim only gets paid if he provides you a debt workout. Looking for a debt solution or financing? Give Tim a call at 772-872-6099 or visit commercialmortgagellc.com to schedule your free consultation. No hype, just facts. I'm Casey, and I invite you to tune into the Casey Ingram Show at my new time, Wednesdays at 10 a.m. Hear from community leaders, learn about some of our great nonprofit organizations, get the latest updates from our elected officials, and meet the candidates. Even rock and roll legends have joined the show from time to time. I'm conservative but not divisive, bringing you the talk of the community. It is a fun and interesting hour beginning at 10 a.m. every Wednesday on WSTU AM 1450 and Facebook Live at The Casey Ingram Show.
You are listening to WSTU, Stewart, Jensen Beach, Hope Sound, Martin County's Heritage Station.
You're listening to The Casey Ingram Show on WSTU Digital 1450. Call in with questions and comments at 220-9788. 220-WSTU. And now back to the show.
Welcome back to the second half hour. We are going to continue our discussion on the Rural Lifestyle Amendment, folks, that was recently passed here in Martin County. And since then, I know that there was a publication that was calling that perhaps Commissioner Hetherington should be recalled for her vote. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show, is there is more to this story, and this Rural Lifestyle Amendment really has a tremendous amount of benefits that I think are overlooked. It's a very emotional issue because we all care about Martin County, and over the last couple of years, especially with COVID, so many people are moving here and things are changing. But at the end of the day, and Paul and I were talking about it just ahead of the break, the state definitely can come in and they can dictate how we're going to build, and they may change our lands from one unit to 20 acres to 1 unit to a half acre if they wanted to, if they see that there's a necessity for that. And Martin County is trying to get ahead of anything that could happen with that, because there's residential capacity analysis, and when it hits a certain point, that's when they have to move the urban service boundary, and that's going to change the designation on these lands when that gets moved. They're trying to stay ahead of that and say, how can we protect our lands and perpetuity. And this was such an amazing amendment for Martin County that, Paul, you just said out of 130,000 acres, if we applied it to all our ag lands, 91,000 would be open space forever in perpetuity. So it's really, that's for anybody that's concerned about the growth and the environmental implications, just think about it that way. We're back to we were talking about the other 30%. Yes, it's cluster development in there, but that means less roads and less development in other areas, which helps our wildlife. And folks, I'm on social media, and I know all of you have seen the photos of the coyotes, and there's bobcats. So many things have been displaced. The black bear in Palm Beach County was the one that just absolutely tore me apart when the sheriff shot that poor bear, and he didn't have anywhere to go. Again, there's a bear in my yard, and when you have 1 unit for 5 acres, 1 unit for 20 acres, where do you think the bear is going to go? But you can't always control wildlife, but at least if 70% of it's open, chances are they don't want to be next to the people either. They're just looking for berries and the things that they forage for. So that residential capacity limit is really a big thing to consider as well, don't you think, Paul? I think that's coming up. I don't know what the time frame was, but
yeah, it'll either come up towards the end of this year, but certainly next year. And I think it's every 6 or 7 years they have to come up with a plan that meets 125% population growth and how you're going to handle that growth. And of course, in a certain sense, right now, with all the people coming in, what is it? Something like 1,000 families a week, or I think it is.
Right, it is.
Right?
Yes.
Well, people are going to go, and sooner or later, there's going to be pressure to build in open land. And I think the other thing, just to sideline a little bit, digress a little bit, these people own the land. Farmers have owned it, some of them for generations. And they have a right at some point to sell if they wish, especially since we've had the greening of the citrus greening event, which makes it difficult to really go back and start growing oranges and grapefruits and things like that again.
Right.
So a lot of the land has become fallow. So what do you do?
Right.
I mean, and you have expenses and things like that. So this is a way to offer, with controlled conditions, something to do with the land and satisfy that the owner has some rights to sell. And that's the big thing in Florida, if you're not aware, is that people are taking a stronger stance on the rights of property owners. And some of that means that the counties don't have as much control as they used to. So why not come up with a plan that everybody can maybe feel comfortable with and kind of can look in the future and say, well, I can do something like that, so I know I've got a plan now. I don't have to worry about how I'm going to sell my land or how can I pay my bills or whatever. So the farmers, the agricultural people, they have some concerns, and they're just trying to do what's right. Most of them are very environmental that I've talked to, but we have to give them a reason to be environmental.
Right. Well, and that was one thing with the Becker development, is right now a lot of the land, it is fallow, and they're trying to keep invasive species off it, and they're spending a ton of money every year just fighting the invasive species. So
good point.
It's tremendous financial stress on a lot of the farmers just in that area. And before the break, you actually brought up one of the lands right issues, I think, in Orange County. That's really what that came down to. You have a property right issue that it was decided the property owner had a right to develop his land. And we do have to realize that those issues are out there, and we will be sued if we're, I guess it's easy for somebody that doesn't own the land and doesn't have anything invested in the property to say, nope, you got to keep it like this because that's how we want it. But at the end of the day, we have to think about that property owner as well.
Yes.
And again, with this amendment, it's really a benefit to our environment, and to have so many open spaces, which drew us all here to Martin County. Is huge.
And that's part of the win-win discussion. I've learned the hard way, let's say, in many negotiations. Some of them tell you about my history. I used to negotiate a lot with the Soviet Union and Russia. And one of the things I learned from it was, how do you both walk away where you both feel you won something? And that maintains relationships. If you have one that overpowers the other, you may win that battle, but you will lose the war because you won't have built relationships. And I think what the county is trying to do And I think it's an interesting idea, is this rural lifestyle offers maybe a win-win where we, the people who live here and our residents, see an opportunity where perhaps a large amount of land will be preserved in the future for the environmental reasons, and we're actually making developers think about the environment before we give approvals. This is what Martin County is, and I think the commissioners have gone a long way to try and introduce a concept that maybe is worth considering. And now, of course, it's passed, but I mean, at the time when the discussion was going on, I really think that there should have been more discussions. And I would critique the environmental groups for not really having discussions with Discovery, because you would have found that, hey, these are nice people, and they are concerned about the environment. I mean, I have been communicating with their head office and offering some ideas and thoughts, and they are open to hearing it. Okay, they're not closed to these ideas. They want to consider it. They want to be a good citizen. If they're going to be a wealthy development, don't you think they probably want to give a good example, that they want to be good citizens? So they're going to try to do the right thing, I believe.
I believe that they are as well, and I had the opportunity to go and see the farm itself. And one of the things that they're doing as tree farmers right now is everything is computerized. They're sending in samples of their soil, of their water, to make sure nothing is over fertilized. They're not putting in too much or too little of whatever that needs to be done. They're very conscious of the environment and what impacts their farming has on it. So, and they're part of this development. It's part of their land, and I agree with you, Paul, that we need to give them a chance, because this development doesn't mean people are bad. It doesn't mean that they're here to pollute. And I agree with you as well that it's good that they're going to be put on sewer and not septics. That's a benefit to our environment. That's an argument that I've heard over the years here as well. I never can really understand the advantage of a septic with all our water around, but they have access. And there's some other things with this particular project, Paul, that maybe you can talk about environmentally. The headwater projects, the Loxalucy, I think it is, that runs through there. They're going to add in more environmental lands to connect through. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. There's a map, Iggy.
Well, there is
on the north side of the property.
On the north side of the property, they have a canal, okay, and that canal enters into the St. Lucie South, okay, and one of the discussions that I've had with them is they're going to have this 200-acre lake that they're going to make, right? So that's where, of course, a lot of the runoff is going to go to, right? But how do you control that before it gets into the canal, which then gets into the St. Lucie? Well, they are open to an idea of doing the water quality management before they let the water into that canal, which then ends up into the St. Lucie South Fork. And that's where the thing that they're looking at right now is, can we automate this so before any water is released, they have a record of what the nitrogen and phosphorus levels, for example, are.
It's almost like its very own storm treatment area, a mini one.
Yeah. So they are really sensitive to that. And when you talk to Tom Hurley, who's the CEO, he is generally, wanting something to come out of this which is good for the environment. And, well, it's up to you whether you believe him or not. I do.
Right.
And I've had enough contact with him that I believe he's sincere. Does he agree with everything environmental people want? No. But he understands the need for good water quality. That is for sure.
He does, and that particular project is bringing a lot of benefits. We'll talk a little bit more about the financial benefits it's bringing, but it also, I know one thing they're going to donate is a stable. It's a beautiful stable. It's right next to the park, and folks are going to be able to. They're probably going to have a horse rental agency out there where folks can enjoy, horseback riding and enjoy the parks that are here in Martin County that was not available to them before. And they have a building on there that was an old train depot.
Right.
It has a lot of historic value, and they're donating that back to. I don't know if it's to the county, but it's going to find a new spot back in Hobe Sound.
Right. So that's why as I said before, there's no one right answer, but this opportunity to me, they've been working on this for over a year. Okay?
Yes.
And I just think that in working with it over a year, I was surprised at the lack of communication between the various groups. And, I just think, and I'm pretty sure that Stacy probably felt the same way.
Yes.
She indicated
so.
that, in some of the things that she said. But in the end, Stacy had to make a decision. I mean, you can't just pass. She needed to decide which side of the fence she wanted to be on. And I believe that she decided that this opportunity was worthwhile to consider for the longer term. And I think that's where she took the hit. And I think many of the people who critique her, I bet when you talk to them, they really don't have the background. And they're just following what some of the other environmental leaders are saying. And, I just wish that people would have taken more time to understand what was going on.
I do too. I mean, this recall, the narrative that's out there is really unfortunate. And if you watch that meeting, you know that it was well deliberated. And Commissioner Hetherington really had a lot of questions about it. And she really was concerned about the future of Martin County. And if you look at this particular amendment, it's really a protection of our lands. It's not a development of the lands. And that, in the end, is what swayed her, I believe, to vote for it. And that's kind of what we wanted to discuss here today. And I have a couple more comments here from Facebook. Amy mentioned from the meeting yesterday, Amy Pritchett, the gopher turtles are being robbed of their homes during yesterday's meeting. A presentation was given, and it shows that they are a keystone species, which through their burrowing, they provide homes and shelter for many other species. We need to do better. And here again, you have 50% land in perpetuity that'll be agri-conservation, 70% open space. The gopher tortoises, when we've seen all the development, they have to move because there's a home in every quarter acre, half acre.
I was actually involved in this discussion. And what the county did was, instead of looking for land that was within Martin County, they just exported the whole problem off to another county and took the gophers because they want to build in the runway over by
the
our airport. And I was just surprised that no more really research was done, because there's plenty of open land. We have a lot of preserves still. So did they look at that?
Right.
And they came back and they said, well, we need the wildlife department to agree that we can do that. And I was just thinking, well, why didn't you do that in advance,
Right.
So now what I think that was what that discussion was yesterday. It came back, and now they were asked to find out if they could get approval by the state wildlife group that we could actually house gophers here on land that is within Martin County.
Makes sense. It makes sense. I certainly would support that 100%.
Why would we outsource that problem?
Right.
I don't have their side of the story, but it seems very puzzling to me.
It is, and we do have a lot of land in conservation already in Martin County, so I agree with you. Let's keep our gopher tortoises here. Alicia Parenteau, appreciate you tuning in. She said Martin County commissioners have worked hard to find balance between the need for homes and keeping the green space. The Newfield project in Palm City set the bar high for future development. The private golf course project in yesterday's agenda was also presented well, with innovative ideas of using the canal water, thus using less additional fertilizer that would be required. Both projects would be great models. And that's really what it's about for these commissioners sitting up there, is trying to decide how to develop Martin County, keep it in conservation as much as possible, but we have to still have development.
Yeah, and I just want to say, from an environmental perspective, I respect the fact that, Maggie Herchala and her legacy is still out there and does have some input even today.
Yes.
After she had passed on. And I respect that. But at some point, we never know when a good opportunity may come up. And I just think that if you look at this, and if you don't mind, I'll just give a few facts. They're saying, and this is an outside source that's giving this information, it's was done by an accounting firm, 436 in permanent jobs, 10,755 temporary jobs, $15.5 million in wages, $39.5 million in annual ongoing permanent economic activities. I don't quite know what that is, but okay, we'll move on. $543.4 million annual associated wages and salaries. 1.6 gross economic output, 21 million annual ad valorem revenue. So I'm just saying, this is not small stuff. This is really a big impact on a relatively small county within Florida. And this could be a way to set a bar that's high enough and has enough rules and regulations, which can be improved, to set a standard for the rest of the future for Martin County. And that's why I felt very strongly about this.
And the other thing to keep in mind there is you're rolling off some of these benefits, the taxes that these folks will be paying, and Jupiter Island is much in the same genre. This is going to keep the taxes, in my opinion, lower for the rest of us, because these folks are paying such an enormous amount more than the average homeowner here in Martin County. Right. And we're fortunate to have that. Not every county has these enclaves of folks that are going to be paying an exponential amount of property taxes. And we need to take advantage of that. It helps the whole community.
There's another advantage which I might add to your conversation, and that is these people are possibly going to have strong connections with government. And do you think that they're going to allow where they live to have anything but the best that they can possibly obtain in terms of the environmental?
Good point.
They want to be those people theoretically would want to be good county citizens. So if we have a problem, there may be some significant pushback by these type of people who, because of their wealth and connections, can influence us positively in Martin County when we have problems with state or federal issues.
That's a very good point. And another point there was the philanthropic organizations throughout Martin County. They're excited to have these folks here.
Another good
point. These are the folks that can make some donations that are worthwhile and really make a difference. Right. And that's one thing I will say about Martin County. We come together on different issues, and people are very generous. And to have this type of community for people that can add to the generosity, I think we're fortunate.
Yeah, and I believe that they will set a standard which will be a little bit of peer pressure, which will force other developments to match what they are doing and to live up to being a good citizen as well. And so there's some peer pressure I think would be applied.
Definitely there will be peer pressure for certain. And, the benefits, we just kind of went over them, and I had some of them as well. The economic benefits were a major part of it that some folks really don't want to pay attention to, but they are ever so important. And we really wanted to do this show today, folks, to maybe show the benefits to this rural lifestyle amendment. And if you can put yourself in the shoes of the commissioners and realize that, they have roads and infrastructure to upkeep. They need to bring in more income to the county just to run our whole county. Do they come to us citizens and ask for a tax raise, or they have these wonderful developments that are, in my opinion, I thought the biggest misrepresentation is it's not conserving our lands. Mm-hmm. I truly feel this is a really good amendment, and that's why I could get behind it. And I did write a letter, and I'll share part of it here because we got a few minutes. But I equated it to football fields, and I'm going to use the Discovery Project in particular on this one because we all know what a football field is. We're talking about 70%, 30%. It's kind of hard to envision. The Discovery Project has 1,531 acres or 1,158 football fields, 75% total with open space or 851 football fields, and 765 acres will be in permanent conservation, a whopping contiguous 579 football fields. And folks, that's the thing that got me is that's 500, you think about 579 football fields, that huge open space, and for the wildlife to have that and not worry about being run over by cars or, what have you, the other things just being impacted with somebody living there.
Well, there is another thing that I would like to bring up is that if you take a trip along the North Fork of St. Lucie, you come up upon what I would call a dead zone where there's not a lot of birds. And the reason why there's not is because there's not a lot of wildlife and for food. And so that was explained to me as the rationale. So if we have this open land that we're talking about, it's going to be a good community where you're going to have both the avian side and you're going to have the the mammals and the reptiles, and all living in a community that will allow them to prosper and to reproduce. And like you said, some of the things like black bears
Right.
And other animals like that, they need, if we care at all about them, they need the land in order to survive. And this is a solution where we're living together and we are accounting for wildlife.
Which to me is a huge thing, and I think for all of us. And Amy, you make a point here, not all wealthy elite residents share the Florida free sentiment, but you can also say that about non-wealthy residents of Florida too. I mean, I can't lump everybody into one bucket ever.
Right. Well, we're only trying to talk here. You're right. We're only trying to talk here about what are some of the possible pros of what that development may offer. That does not take away from some of us who are volunteers who work 3-5 hours per week, doing different things to help keep our environment improving, such as water quality testing. I mean, the number of people who do water quality testing is quite numerous, and every week they are putting in, going out and doing their testing and reporting it back. So we're all contributing. It's not one group. It's because we're Martin County.
That's right. It's exactly because we're Martin County. And one of the groups that's doing a lot of water testing, and they kind of have a citizen force, is the Indian River Keeper, which you sit on that advisory board as well. And I've yet to meet the new Indian River Keeper. I look forward to meeting Jim. I've been busy with this political season, but I'd love to have him on the show. Yeah. Captain Mike Connor was in here quite a few times, and he kind of started that citizen force out there.
Jim Moyer is a very, very knowledgeable person who knows Florida pretty well. I mean, as I recall, he's from Southern Florida, but he knows this area, and he's taken a number of key representatives out to show them the problems. So you couldn't have a better person coming on your show to give his side of the story than Jim Moyer.
I look forward to meeting him, and that's very key to show people our issues, not just talk about it. So I appreciate that he's doing that. And Amy just wanted to clear she's not entirely against the project. I wanted our county to be a part of the process along with the environmentalist, and that's kind of what we're here about. You wanted more of that conversation as well, and for some reason that was lacking between the two entities.
Well, there's more opportunity because as we come up with this growth management, we're going to have to decide whether the math is going to tell us that we have to move the urban boundary because we can't fit all the population within the current boundary. That's coming up, and it's getting close. We're getting closer to needing to have to consider that. And of course, if you have to consider it, what would you want to do? Well, one option could be rural lifestyle because it has some control to it. I know we don't have so much time left, but if I could, I'd just like to again reach out to Stacy and again compliment her on her courage. It's not easy going against a real strong opposition, but yet somehow keeping the facts clear and being able to make a decision. My personal view, in the longer term, her legacy will bear out that she made the right decision.
Paul, I appreciate you saying that, and I agree with you 100%. It was a tough meeting for her that day because there was two that we knew going into that day. There was two that were against this proposal, and there was two that was for it. And there was a lot of pressure on Stacy, and there was a lot of public comment, a lot of input. But I agree with you. Her legacy will stand with this decision. I believe it's going to be a very good one for Martin County.
Yeah. And also I'd like to also thank Harold Jenkins. Harold and I have had several conversations, and he's been very, very helpful to give me a perspective. And that was one perspective which helped me to come to grips with my decision after talking to the environmental groups. And the one thing I want to point out is that in every case, I did reach out to the environmental groups and I asked them, what about the longer term? I felt I never really got a good answer on that. It seemed to be more short-term related. That's my side of the story. They may disagree, but that's what I heard.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and it's a very valid point to make. The environmental groups have a large voice, as they should in this area. So it's important that everybody come together. And again, we're trying to just bring out the facts of the project and the facts of this comp plan amendment. And it's easy to spin information, and we see a lot of that with any contentious ordinance, litigation, whatever that's coming up. But it's important to look at the facts. It's important to look at the long-term benefits or detriments to a project. And this one, there was a lot to consider. And you're right, Commissioner Hetherington had a lot on her shoulders that day. And for her to kind of try and get rid of the noise and focus on what the benefits
white
were.
noise.
The right
Yeah.
noise, that's right.
Yeah.
And she did. So just hats off to her for that. And folks, we elect them, and it's a tough seat for them to always sit in, because they can't make everybody happy, and this is one of those issues. A prime example of that. You're not going to make everybody happy, but I think in the long term, we're going to see some true benefits,
Yeah.
and hopefully people will look back and say, you know what, that was a good amendment.
Right. And I think what helped was we have a model with Discovery that gave us the opportunity to look at this, and because of their willingness to participate in this structure, I think we'll set a high bar in the future.
Discovery did, and what people don't realize, they actually had quite a few meetings. They went out and they actually put one of them on Zoom, so if you weren't able to make it to the meeting, you're at least able to tap in and ask your questions and see what was happening at that meeting. The project developers themselves really, I felt, tried to reach out to the community.
Well, I attended Discovery's, one of their sessions. I was just surprised, and I asked a couple of other people who had attended, and I got sort of a similar answer. I was surprised that we didn't see more of the points coming out challenging Discovery, just saying, well, what about this? What about... We didn't see a lot of the challenge. They were asking for clarification, because
Right.
some people said they were confused with all the information that was out there. But that wasn't what they were objecting to. They were just to the regulation. They were only trying to get clarification, and that was all. So I was thinking, why didn't the environmentalists come out to those meetings and really challenge? And maybe they should have had them earlier. Discovery should have had them earlier, like Kippingler did when
Right.
they did the Pineland Prairie. But still they didn't come out. I was surprised by that.
And that would have been a really good time to bring out those objections. So, folks, I hope you were able to take a lot of insight about this comp plan amendment. Paul, Laura, thank you so much. Your
very
insight,
welcome.
you've always been a wonderful guest, and I have a lot of respect for what you say. And, you bring a lot to the table for information and cited facts, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next week, we'll be back. In the meantime, folks, stay dry. Pray for our friends on the West Coast. And we'll be back in the studio next week with a couple shows that'll be a lot of fun. Thanks much.